There are certain things in life that just get under your skin, things that test your patience no matter how easygoing you are. For me, one of those things is unbearable summer heat. You know the kind where stepping barefoot on hot asphalt feels like walking on a griddle, or sitting on leather furniture risks leaving half your skin behind. If you can't stand that kind of heat, well, maybe don't live in Thailand. Another thing that's guaranteed to make anyone's list of daily frustrations? Dealing with the Homeowners Association, HOA for short. These groups often come with endless rules, fines for the tiniest infractions, and an air of self-righteous authority that can make even the most reasonable person want to scream. And then, of course, there are Karens, the ones who act like their opinions are gospel and anyone who dares disagree must be punished. But what happens when all three collide in one big, messy storm? That's exactly what happened to me. I live in the South, so dealing with extreme summer heat is just part of the deal. It's miserable, but manageable. What wasn't manageable was my previous experience with an HOA. Let's just say it involved $300 fines for hanging wind chimes and formal complaints over having a second car parked in my driveway while my sister stayed with me during her home renovation. That was the last straw. I swore off HOAs forever. So when a small plot of land came up for sale not too far away, I jumped at the chance. The house was more modest than my current one, but it was free of HOA oversight. I confirmed this with a real estate lawyer before making the move. And let me tell you, those first few weeks were blissful. No rules about parking cars, no complaints about decor, and best of all, it had a pool. A real, beautiful backyard pool. That was going to be my way of surviving the brutal southern summers. But peace doesn't always last long. About a month after moving in, I received a certified letter from someone I knew all too well, Margaret Bluer. Yep, that name again. She'd been the iron-fisted leader of my old HOA board for decades. The letter was full of bureaucratic nonsense, claiming my new property was somehow still under HOA jurisdiction based on some outdated survey and obscure legal clause. It listed a bunch of violations I needed to fix immediately. For a moment, panic set in. Had I really not escaped the HOA after all? I called my attorney, Elena, and sent her a photo of the letter. A few hours later, she called back laughing slightly and said, "Don't worry. This is either a mistake or a bluff. Your property is independent. Just ignore it unless they come at you harder." Relieved, I put the letter aside and went back to enjoying my HOA-free life. Big mistake. 6 days later, I was swimming laps on a Saturday morning. The sun was already beating down hard, so cooling off in the pool felt amazing. As I swam, I heard the gate creak and the sound of heels clicking on the patio. I surfaced and saw none other than Margaret herself, decked out in a perfectly pressed linen pantsuit, clipboard in one hand, tape measure in the other. She didn't seem surprised to see me, but I sure was to see her. I hadn't interacted with her much before, but I recognized her instantly. She stood a few feet from the edge of the pool and started listing off violations. My fence height was wrong, I had wind chimes on my porch, my landscaping rocks weren't approved by the design committee, and so on. I climbed out of the pool, grabbed a towel, and tried to stay polite. "Mrs. Bluer," I began. "Miss," she snapped. "Right. Miss Bluer. Listen, I don't want to make a scene, but you're trespassing. This property isn't part of the HOA, so none of those rules apply here. Please leave so I can enjoy my Saturday." She completely ignored me, pulling out her phone and taking pictures of everything she considered non-compliant. She muttered something about insubordination and documentation. I repeated myself louder, asking her to leave again. She finally turned around and pointed at me. "You're violating HOA standards, and I'm documenting it. You received the letter. This property is under HOA jurisdiction whether you like it or not." That's when things took a turn. As she reached for her clipboard, her phone slipped from her hand. She tried to catch it, only knocking it further toward the edge of the pool. Then, as she leaned forward to grab it, she lost her balance. Time slowed down. She flailed her arms, dropped both the clipboard and the tape measure, which landed right on her exposed toes, and with a high-pitched squeal, tumbled straight into the pool. Without thinking, I dove in after her. She was panicking, flailing around, and clearly couldn't swim well. I pulled her to the surface and got her to the side of the pool. Once she was out, I asked if she was okay. She shrank away from me like I was some kind of threat. Her phone was still at the bottom of the pool, so I dove down and grabbed it. She snatched it from my hand and scrambled to her feet, collecting her things. You're going to hear from my lawyer," she sputtered, soaked and furious. Her once pristine outfit was now a soggy mess, her hair plastered to her face. She wobbled off the deck and disappeared from my property. Turns out, she wasn't kidding. A week later, I got a letter saying I was being sued for negligent property conditions that nearly caused her death. Yeah, you read that right. But here's the thing, my security camera caught the entire incident. Audio included, timestamped and saved in multiple places. I contacted Elena again, and she connected me with Joe, another attorney who watched the footage and barely held in his laughter. He agreed I had nothing to worry about. We went to court a couple of weeks later. Margaret's lawyer looked visibly embarrassed. The video was shown to everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, who clearly struggled to keep a straight face. It showed exactly what happened, her trespassing, ignoring my requests to leave, dropping her phone, and falling into the pool on her own. The case was dismissed quickly. The judge ruled in my favor and even reprimanded Margaret for trespassing. When she kept arguing that my property was under HOA control, her own lawyer buried his head in his hands. The judge reviewed the survey documents and made it clear she was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. And yes, the video played several times. Everyone could see I had nothing to do with her fall and that I actually helped pull her out of the water. By the end of it, Margaret was beet red with rage. She even yelled at the judge, accusing him of being blind to zoning laws until he threatened her with contempt. After that, she vanished from my life. The HOA board was so embarrassed by her actions that they kicked her off the board. She wrote me a handwritten apology, fake as they come, but I accepted it gladly, especially since she also had to pay my legal fees. If there's one lesson to take from this whole ordeal, it's simple: respect boundaries. Especially when there's proof you've crossed them. As for me, I went back to enjoying my pool, my freedom, and the sweet relief of not having to deal with HOAs or HOA Karens ever again. A few years ago, I was hired as a manager to build out the contracts department for a tech startup. The company was based on the opposite coast, so my boss and I barely communicated beyond the occasional email or Zoom call. Things went really well, so well, in fact, that after about a year, the company brought in consultants to overhaul nearly every department except mine. Contracts was running smoothly enough that they didn't see a need to touch it. That made me incredibly proud. I had built something solid from the ground up. As a thank you for all the work I'd done, the company even sent me on a fully paid trip to the Bahamas. It was a nice gesture, and well-deserved, if you ask me. When I got back from vacation, I figured it was time to talk about a promotion. I asked to be moved up to director level, thinking it was a no-brainer at that point. But my boss shot me down, saying I just wasn't there yet. So I asked for specifics. What exactly did I need to do to earn the title? He sent over a list of responsibilities, which turned out to be everything I was already doing. And in one of the more honest moments I've ever seen from a manager, he basically admitted that if I became director, he wouldn't have anything left to take credit for anymore. That's when my friends started telling me I needed to either quit or shut up and stop pushing. But instead of going down either of those paths, I chose something a little more creative. I decided to kill with kindness. I sent my boss a sincere apology for overstepping and told him I was going to step fully back into my manager role. I printed out the official manager job description, taped it to my desk, and committed to only doing what was listed there. No extra effort. No fixing problems that weren't part of my official duties. Just strict compliance, no more, no less. And let me tell you, things fell apart faster than I could have imagined. We started missing sales targets almost immediately. Products were getting delayed. My boss agreed to terms and agreements that completely destroyed the budget and messed up product rollouts. He didn't understand commission structures, so we ended up paying commissions on contracts that had termination clauses, meaning we paid people for deals that ended up falling through. Sales teams began manipulating contracts, and he just let it happen. I only stepped in once to block an amendment that would have allowed a VP to inflate sales numbers. Even then, it took the controller and CFO stepping in before things were corrected. Eventually, the CEO had to get involved. Rumors started circulating around the office about my boss carrying stress balls to meetings and swearing under his breath during calls. Meanwhile, I was more relaxed than I'd been in years. With all the free time I suddenly had at work, I studied for and passed a couple of professional certifications. I even started leaving early to hit the gym before it got crowded. About a month after I scaled back my responsibilities, my boss gave me a 7% bonus. It wasn't officially framed as a raise or a promotion, but it felt like a quiet way of saying, please come back to doing what you were doing before, just don't make a big deal about it. But I stayed the course. I followed the manager job description to the letter. No more, no less. 6 months later, after taking 10 days off from my unlimited PTO, I was included in a round of layoffs. I saw it coming, honestly. I wasn't surprised. I took 3 months off after that and landed a new job with a 35% salary increase. Now, I'm happy with where I am. I love my new company and the people I work with. But looking back, it still stings knowing someone kept taking credit for work I did. It's frustrating to watch someone ride your coattails and then cut you loose when it's no longer convenient. The next story I want to share is titled Revenge on a Bully. This happened not too long ago, just a few months back. With everything going on during the pandemic, jobs have been hard to come by, especially where I live. And good-paying ones? Even harder to find. So when I was headhunted by a pretty large IT company, one that's actually a subsidiary of the government, I felt incredibly lucky. It was exactly the kind of opportunity one needed at exactly the right time. I had only been with the company for about 3 months when something unexpected happened. I was walking past a room and saw the HR manager stepping out with a new candidate. As soon as I saw her face, I recognized her immediately. It was my old classmate from college. Let's call her V. We had a bit of history back in school. I started college a little later than most people. I was already in my mid-20s while most of my classmates were between 18 and 20. V was one of those people who made life harder for others just because she could. She had zero empathy, especially toward anyone struggling or dealing with health issues. If someone was sick or injured, she'd roll her eyes and say something like, "If you're that sick, you shouldn't even be here." Or, if someone was having money problems, "If you can't afford college, you should be working instead." There was another classmate of ours named G, who had cerebral palsy. Walking long distances or standing for hours was tough for her. Since we were all film majors, producing films was a big part of our final grade. I often stepped in to help G with tasks she couldn't handle due to her condition. I've lost count of how many times I had to defend her from V's cruelty. One time, G ended up hospitalized in the middle of a shoot because of a spine issue. I volunteered to cover her duties so the project wouldn't fall apart. Do you know what V said? "I'm doing the job of 2 people and you're the one complaining?" "Yeah, okay, Karen." Another time, I had an accident that left me half-blind for a month because I couldn't wear glasses over the gauze on my eye. I asked V if a lecturer was in the room she was coming out of, and she snapped at me, "Go check yourself." Anyway, circling back, our HR manager was actually a friend of mine. So after seeing V walk out of the interview room, I pulled her aside for coffee and told her about our shared past. I explained that V had a serious problem with people facing challenges, whether it was disabilities, financial struggles, or being a single parent. I pointed out that our company hires quite a few people from those groups and asked how V could possibly make fair decisions for employees when she looked down on them so much. She listened carefully and took it seriously. Ultimately, the decision wasn't mine to make, but a few days later, I heard that V didn't get the job. Another candidate was chosen instead. I wish I could have seen the look on her face when they told her the company found someone more empathetic and better suited for the role. My HR friend even showed me the email she sent explaining the decision. I ran into V again 2 months later at a classmate's company opening ceremony. I'm pretty sure she knew I had something to do with her not getting the job. She gave me the coldest stare all night. Best feeling ever. Now, the next story is called Karen Claimed She Owned My House. This one goes back a bit further. My parents divorced when I was young. My dad remarried his mistress, and my mom moved to another country. Both of them would send money occasionally, but we mostly grew up on our own. We all lived in the house they owned together. As the older siblings moved out, eventually only my youngest brother, who was 17 at the time, was left living there. He had been dating a girl since he was 15, and when he was alone, she basically moved in. My mom came home for a visit and kicked her out. Her mother then approached my mom and suggested they get the kids married since they'd been together for 2 years and were so in love. She thought it would be best to do it before my brother turned 18, so there wouldn't be any legal complications. My mom thought it was ridiculous and told her they should break up and wait until both were older. Then she had to leave again, leaving my brother alone. 3 months later, this girl's mom moves into my parents' house. She claimed it was abandoned because only a minor lived there. She tried changing the utility bills to her name and even convinced some neighbors to lie and say she had lived there for years. My brother was young, lonely, and overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do, so he let it happen. But when my mom couldn't come back right away, I decided to step in. I had already moved to a different state, but I packed up and went back. I took back my old room and used my sister's room for my kids, leaving the woman and her family with only the living room. She got mad, broke some of my stuff, and even yelled at my kids. That's when I drew the line. She called the cops claiming I was trespassing. She picked a fight with my neighbor when he backed me up with the police. And when she finally moved out, she took some of my parents' belongings with her. She even tried convincing my brother to go with her, thinking that once I left, she could move back in. But by that point, my brother had had enough. He broke things off with her completely. He stayed single for a long time after that. Later, I moved back to my husband's home state. Rumor has it she tried pulling the same stunt on someone else and ended up getting kicked out by the police. To add a little background, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. My parents essentially moved on with their lives and barely paid us any attention. We were left to take care of ourselves from the time I was 14, with my younger siblings being 9 and 10. I don't live in the US, and when I moved out, my grandma or aunt would look after the rest since they refused to come with me. This next story is an absolute masterpiece of revenge, neighborhood-level justice at its finest. It's titled, "Neighbor Tried to Get My Mom Fined Over Our Shed, so I got his $40,000 pool filled in." I live with my mom, and she's the kind of person who keeps to herself, never causes any trouble, and doesn't bother anyone. She's quiet, polite, and just wants to live her life peacefully. But a few months ago, our new neighbor decided to stir up some unnecessary drama. Out of the blue, he reported her to the city for having what he claimed was an illegal shed in our backyard. That really got under my skin because it was such blatant nonsense. The shed had been there for years, long before this guy ever moved in, and it had all the proper permits. Nothing about it was sketchy or against the rules. An inspector came out to check things over, took a look around, and left without saying a word. But that didn't stop the neighbor from acting smug and proud like he'd actually scared us somehow. Well, that's when I decided to do a little digging of my own. Turns out, this guy had recently installed a brand new pool, and it was built way too close to the property line. Not only that, but it was also illegally constructed over a utility easement. Huge red flags. Major violations. So I did exactly what he did, but better. I reported him to the city, attached clear photos, quoted the exact city codes he violated, and waited. 2 weeks later, the city responded with an official notice: either move the pool, which was completely impossible, or have it filled in. He had no choice. Game over. That $40,000 pool? Gone. Buried. Finished. All that's left now is a giant pile of dirt where it used to be. And now, every single day, this guy gets to look out his window at our completely legal shed while standing over the remains of what used to be his pride and joy. I'd say that's poetic justice. Honestly, it's one of the most satisfying comeuppances I've ever seen. And as for my mom, she's sleeping great now, knowing she didn't have to deal with any fines, thanks to a little payback on my part.